In the final years before the world descended into chaos, Israel, driven by an unrelenting neo-Zionist vision, escalated its territorial ambitions into a full-scale, unrelenting campaign of ethnic cleansing. Under the guise of securing the Promised Land, the Palestinian territories were devastated by a brutal military onslaught, reducing cities to dust and forcing millions into exile or death. What had long been feared but never fully anticipated unfolded in horrifying detail before the eyes of a world too paralyzed to act. This machinery of destruction was not only ideologically driven, but fueled by the profit motive. The ever-hungry military-industrial complex, thriving on war and conflict, saw the devastation as an opportunity. Defense contractors and arms manufacturers from the U.S. to Israel grew fat on the spoils of war, while corporations that thrived on bloodshed saw the conflict as little more than a financial windfall. The powerful Israeli lobby, AIPAC, ensured that U.S. politicians remained silent or complicit, their coffers filled by defense contractors and wealthy donors, guaranteeing an uninterrupted flow of billions in military aid to Israel. In Washington, the rare voices of dissent were drowned out by the deafening roar of the machinery of war, the machinery of profit. Meanwhile, as bombs fell and cities burned, a more insidious phenomenon gripped societies across the globe. IQs and EQs, the cornerstones of human intellectual and emotional intelligence, began to decline. Humanity, once capable of empathy, critical thinking, and emotional connection, was caught in a feedback loop of superficiality and misinformation. Media, once a vehicle for informing the public, had been hijacked by sensationalism, feeding people a constant stream of fear, distraction, and spectacle. Empathy shriveled, replaced by apathy. Those watching from afar offered nothing but hollow, emotionless reactions, as if the atrocities they witnessed were mere episodes in a grim reality show. "It's not our problem," they said. "What can we do anyway?" The masses, willingly ignorant, became accomplices to the horrors, their shallow words fueling the bloodshed. Willful ignorance swept through society like a plague, and bystanders, instead of protesting, offered hollow opinions or none at all, choosing distraction over responsibility. Apathy became the currency of the day, and with it, moral decay followed swiftly. Simultaneously, far-right nationalists found an unlikely ally in the neo-Zionist cause. United by their shared love for ethno-nationalism and their mutual disdain for outsiders, these factions, across Europe and the United States, began to align with the Zionist agenda of territorial expansion and ethnic cleansing. What had once been fringe rhetoric now mirrored mainstream Zionist ambitions, and the far-right's vision of racial purity found a disturbing reflection in Israel's relentless pursuit of a state purged of Palestinians. This alliance was forged not from shared faith or affection for Israel, but from a common hatred of the other. In the United States, evangelical Christians joined the chorus, motivated by their own apocalyptic beliefs. They saw Israel's dominance over Jerusalem as the key to fulfilling prophecies of the Second Coming, and so they cheered on the violence, viewing it as a necessary prelude to divine intervention. Their influence in Washington ensured that U.S. policy would back Israel's every move, no matter the human cost. Meanwhile, American dependence on oil-rich Arab nations deepened. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, once cautious of Israel's aggression, turned a blind eye, addicted to lucrative arms deals and military aid from the West. Despite their outward allegiance to the Palestinian cause, these nations quietly signed contracts with defense contractors, securing their own survival while doing nothing to stop the massacre. The hypocrisy was as thick as oil and just as black. In this landscape of death, profit, and manipulation, powerful entities behind the scenes played their hands with precision. The military-industrial complex, intelligence networks, and influential lobbying groups engineered crises, knowing that their solutions would benefit only a select few. Problem and solution became indistinguishable, a deadly cycle that kept the world locked in perpetual conflict while enriching those at the top. A terrorist attack here, a regional flare-up there. Each crisis was met with ready-made solutions: more surveillance, more weapons, more war. With each turn of this grim wheel, the elites grew wealthier, their control over society more absolute. As this madness unfolded, society sank deeper into a pit of ignorance and superficiality. Willful ignorance became the default mindset, shielding people from the harsh reality of their complicity. The masses, once capable of significant change, now wandered through life like zombies, consumed by distractions, celebrity gossip, consumerism, and fleeting entertainment. The connections between violence, profit, and suffering were there for all to see, but few dared to examine them. To confront the truth meant confronting their own culpability, and that was a step most were unwilling to take. As the genocide in Palestine reached its climax, the world finally stirred, but by then, it was far too late. A coalition of nations, exasperated by Israel's unrelenting aggression and the U.S. unwavering support, formed a military alliance. Russia, China, Iran, Egypt, and Europe, along with numerous other nations, began threatening military action. Protests erupted worldwide, even in cities like New York and Paris, where Jewish and non-Jewish voices alike condemned the atrocities. Feeling the weight of global isolation, Israel found itself increasingly cornered. What had started as a nationalistic pursuit of territorial expansion now risked turning the entire world against it. Despite the steadfast backing of the United States, international pressure mounted, and key allies in Europe and even within the Arab world began withdrawing their support, leaving Israel in a precarious position. But it was the growing threat of Iranian involvement that pushed tensions to a breaking point. Iran, Israel's longtime adversary in the region, had been quietly building a network of proxy forces, Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Syria, surrounding Israel on multiple fronts. In response to Israeli aggression, Iran accelerated its nuclear capabilities, asserting its right to defend the oppressed Palestinians. Tensions between Israel and Iran reached a critical juncture when an Iranian-backed militia launched a series of devastating missile strikes into Israeli territory. Although limited in scope, these attacks sent a clear message. Iran would not remain passive as the conflict intensified. Israel's leadership, already gripped by paranoia and focused on securing dominance, feared a coordinated assault by Iran and its allies that could cripple the nation. The situation escalated further when Iran mobilized its military, signaling that it was prepared to intervene directly if the ethnic cleansing did not cease. Convinced that a large-scale war with Iran was inevitable and desperate to maintain a strategic advantage, Israel made the unthinkable decision to launch a preemptive nuclear strike on Tehran. Their leaders believed this would neutralize the Iranian threat once and for all, but the decision backfired catastrophically. Despite the destruction inflicted by the strike, Iran retaliated swiftly, launching a barrage of missiles at Tel Aviv and Haifa, devastating key infrastructure and causing widespread chaos. The strike on Iran shattered the precarious balance in the region. Russia, a longtime ally of Iran and wary of Israel's increasing militarization, saw the nuclear attack as a dangerous escalation that threatened its interests in the Middle East. Russian leaders viewed Israel's actions as an existential threat to regional stability and, consequently, to their influence. In response, Russia mobilized its nuclear forces, prepared to strike back if Israel continued its aggressive posture. China, equally concerned about the destabilization of global order and eager to assert its dominance, aligned itself with Russia, positioning itself as a defender of balance and firmly opposing Israel's unchecked aggression. In the United States, apocalyptic fervor, driven by evangelical Christian leaders who saw this conflict as the fulfillment of end-times prophecies, led to unwavering support for Israel. The religious narrative intertwined with political power, clouding rational decision-making. When Russia signaled its readiness to retaliate, the U.S. responded in kind, preparing its nuclear arsenal, unwilling to let Israel stand alone regardless of the global consequences. Within hours, the regional conflict between Israel and Iran ignited a full-scale global confrontation. The nuclear dominoes began to fall. Russian and Chinese missiles targeted major Western cities, and the U.S. retaliated, unleashing its full nuclear might. In just days, cities like London, Paris, Beijing, and New York were reduced to ash, consumed in the blinding light of thermonuclear warheads. The world's descent into nuclear Armageddon was not the result of a single mistake, but a series of calculated, paranoid, and self-serving decisions by nations too entrenched in their ideologies to pull back. The neo-Zionist dream of strength and dominance collapsed in the face of mutual destruction, leaving the very people it sought to elevate nearly wiped out, their future scattered to the radioactive winds.